Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to compare an MPC platform versus the SP404mk2. Now, I have not really talked about the SP404mk2 pretty much at all on this channel, and I've had it since it came out, and there's a reason for that. I'm not really as big of a fan of it, but with the update 4.04, it has gotten significantly better. So I thought I would give my perspective on the two, because I have a lot of experience with the MPC platform, and I have some experience with the 404 platform. I've completed a lot of projects with the MPC platform, and I've completed 0 projects with the SP404. I just want you to know that I'm going to be relatively biased towards the MPC platform because I'm the most familiar with it. But the reason I'm making this video is I want to give some insights as to which platform may or may not be good for you from the perspective of having used none of the platforms, okay? So if you're like already a power MPC user, this may or may not be that useful of a video for you, and vice versa. If you're already really aware of what the SP404 can do and how the workflow works, this might not be that useful of a video comparing the MPC either, because it's going to be very high level. So I'm not going to be going into any like deep dives of exactly how the workflows compare to each other. I mean, I will be doing comparisons, but I'm not going to be doing like deep examples of each other, because let's be honest, that would be like a 2-hour long video. Nobody's gonna watch that. I've had the SP404 for a long time, and it's always been one of these things where I've hopped onto it and then bounced off of it pretty fast. And the reason is I end up using a lot of external instruments that are sequenced through Midi. When it comes to the 404, there is extremely limited Midi sequencing options. You do have a Midi out, and you can't actually send the triggers of these pads. Banks A through E can be channel 1, and banks F through J can be channel 2. So you do actually have that flexibility right there if you really needed to sequence something from the SP404, but basically this is not going to sequence external instruments for you. It will provide a clock so you can trigger a different sequencer that could then go into the SP404, and that is very useful. But if you're at all sequencing anything else, or you need the functionality of Midi, then the MPC is clearly the winner in that regards right there. Now, what both of these units excel at is a sample-based platform. And even though they are both sample-based workflows, they're very different. And just for a quick high-level discussion of that, if you look at the MPC, you'll have sequences that then contain tracks, that then contain plugins or samples or stuff that trigger MIDI information from the tracks. And that's encompassed in this screen. And then the pads and the buttons and the transport controls all facilitate that workflow, right? And I mean, you have a regular transport control. You have a record, overdub, stop, play, and play start, which this is non-existent on the 404. With the 404, you have a record button right here, but there's no play on this. You have to go into a pattern select, and then you choose to play a pattern. And then you can stop it by triggering that pattern or triggering another pattern or holding shift and pressing exit a bunch of times to kill any audio that's coming out of it. The MPC definitely feels more like a DAW that's been lifted out of a computer and put into a box to work with. So that right there is honestly one of the biggest workflow paradigm shifts between the two. The MPC is going to give you more of a traditional workflow where you have tracks, and the tracks need some sort of information to trigger sounds. Whereas the SP404 assumes that you're working in audio constantly. In fact, the skip back feature is great for that. Whatever you play on here, oops, let me turn the volume. Whatever you play, it's all been recording. So if I hit the mark button right here, it says skip back, and then it'll show you some stuff that's going on right here. And I could trigger that, or I could chop it up. And that's a really powerful feature. It's a different feature. It's a different workflow, because whatever you're doing with the SP404, it assumes that you're taking audio, constantly processing it, mangling it, shifting it, and then reassigning it to pads. So with all these banks right here, A through J, they have 16 pads each. So for each one of these, I have stuff linked up on here. And it's all basically chunks of audio that have BPMs and time stretching and envelopes and stuff like that that are associated with it. And this can be changed per project. With a total of 16 projects times 10 different banks times 16 samples per bank, that kind of gives you the idea of what can be loaded at any given time for the SP404. And it's also saved in real time. So as soon as I record something on here, it'll just save in the memory. Whereas you have to save projects on the MPC. The MPC has this working memory, but it's volatile, meaning that whatever you do with it, it's not saving it. You have to save it. Otherwise, it's going to be lost to the ethers. So in terms of audio on the MPC, if I click on this square button right here, it's got program 001, and this is essentially how all of the drum kits are loaded up on an MPC. You have a program, and then each one of these pads, if you go into program edit, can have a sample loaded to it to trigger your sounds. Load up a trap kit real quick. So each one of these are samples that are loaded into this program right here, and you can have up to 8 different banks on here. So I'm on bank A right now, which is the default in the first start. Go bank B, C, D, same type of thing as the banks on the SP404. The difference is on the MPC, you can load basically as many programs with all these banks as you need, so long as the memory can support it. So right now, the memory's at 4% with loading like 16 samples essentially. And again, it's all in volatile memory. So if I do want to save anything that I do, I have to go save it to a project that then saves on an SD card inside of this particular MPC. So the sample differences right there, they're very similar, but very different at the same time. Because again, with the SP404, each one of these pads represents a sample essentially. But let's say I want to record something on here. If I press record, it goes into pad selection mode for where I'm going to put that file right away. That's very different from the MPC. If I go into sampler mode on the MPC, it's just going to sample it directly into memory and not like assign it to anything specifically just yet. Let's just arm this real quick. I'm going to record like a couple seconds. Let's assume I recorded a vinyl record or something. As soon as I stop it, it's going to ask me to name the sample. And then I can like keep it, discard it, I can play it, edit it. I can also choose to automatically assign it to a program that's loaded in the memory. Let's say I load it to program 1 and I assign it to one of these pads. Let's go A0 and then I hit keep, like so. Now it's in the memory, but it's not saved to an SD card. It's just in the memory. So if I shut this thing off, that's gone. Now I'm back at this main screen. If I go back to the original program, which is right here, if I go program edit and look at this, you'll see the new sample. If I go over here, no sample on pad 2, pad 1, there's that sample. That process is very different from the SP404. On the SP404, I hit record and then I want to choose a pad, which is going to say this is where this recording exists. I press say 9 right here, turn this up so you can hear the click. Then it's on standby. If I hit record again, the countdown clicks in, and then I can officially start recording anything that was coming into like the guitar, mic input, or the line input on the 404. So I'm gonna hit stop on there, record, cancel. That workflow is very different from each other, and it could honestly spell the difference between fast creativity or sluggishness on either one, depending on how your brain works. For me, I'm definitely faster on the MPC because I'm used to it, but there's been times where I've been able to whip up stuff pretty fast on the 404, but I haven't really taken it beyond just existing on the 404, for whatever that's worth. In the audio department, another huge difference is the effects. And the effects, I will say, are better on the 404. The fine-tuningness of the effects are going to be limited on the 404, but what you do get is very good and sounds very vibey, especially if you're doing lo-fi hip-hop type of stuff. The effects on the modern MPC platform range from dull to pretty damn good. But the best one, Airflavor Pro, costs money. That's gonna give you a lot of like adjustments to be able to work with stuff. But just for an example here, I will go to a plugin. What I'm doing right here is showing something that is not possible on the SP404. So you can load up full-on synthesizers that will generate sound and can be triggered with the keyboard inside of the MPC. With the 404 update on the SP, you do now have the ability to generate sounds from waveforms. Technically is in the same ballpark of what's happening with loading up a synthesizer plugin, but very rudimentary in comparison to what's happening on the MPC. But anyways, back to what I got right here. I have the drum synth program loaded up. It's basically a drum emulation. So if you listen to this, this comes with the MPC. It's not a paid plugin or anything like that. But on top of that, I have the Airflavor plugin loaded up on here, which has some options. And then we'll throw a filter on there as well. Say vintage filter. Some sound design type of stuff that could be pretty fast. And it's being generated as a synthesizer plugin on there, and these effects are dedicated to just this plugin. Meaning I can apply effects to other things. I can apply effects to that trap kit. And if I load this up, so this kit right here can have its own effects, both in terms of the master effects, which it has a bus compressor on there right now. But I can also go deeper if I go into edit program, and then I go to the first pad here, the kick. I actually have an additional set of 4 effects that I can put on just the kick by itself. So, I mean, the effects flexibility on the MPC is obviously considerably more in comparison to the SP404. But the type of effects and the vinyl simulation, cassette effects and all that on the SP404 are very unique and sound awesome. And I'm not gonna go through a bunch of comparisons in this video. Again, I'm trying to keep this video short, but I'm sure you can go online and find a ton of examples of those type of effects in the 404. In fact, a lot of people will run a MPC into a 404 and use it for the effects chain, and maybe even run that back out into the MPC to sample what you get as an effects box from the SP404. So you could treat it exclusively as an effects box and not even worry about like sampling and chopping and you know, making actual patterns on the SP404. That's totally an option. In terms of comparisons, way more effects potential on the MPC, but the effects quality is, I think, slightly better on the 404. Now, when I say it's limited, what I mean is you only have 4 buses, and 2 of them can be assigned to pads, meaning that of the 10 banks, and each bank having 16 samples, for instance, like this, these guys right here, there is 2 buses right here, bus 1, bus 2, and they can be assigned to the pads. And the way you do this is you have to hold remain, and this is just one of these things about the SP404 is it's full of a bunch of shortcuts that are not friendly to the memory initially, at least in my opinion. I've had a lot of times where I just have to stop what I'm doing and go and reference a manual or look up a video. In fact, it's usually videos, and there's a lot of great YouTubers out there that have done awesome content for learning the SP404mk2. So I've had to rely on those quite a bit to get just like some basic things. Like for instance, if I want to change which bus a particular sample goes to, you have to be on the sample. So we'll say this guy right here, and then you hold remain. And then if you tap it, it went to white, which means that it has no effects bus routed to it. Meaning if the effects buses are on at the time, pad 7 of bank J will not get that sound. If I press it again, it goes back to green. And that's because I had bus 2 selected. So depending on what bus you have selected will define where this will go to. So if I press this now, by holding remain and pressing 7 again, it's orange now, which means it's going to bus 1. If I press bus effects again and hold remain, and then press 7, it's back to green. And if I lost you at that point, yep, that's the SP404 experience. So I forgot to mention this when I was recording it, but if you want to apply any of these bus effects to a sound permanently, you have to resample it into another pad, which is very different from the MPC. So in this particular workflow, if you want to save a sound essentially with the bus effects, like a vinyl effect, you have to then resample it back into memory, and then it's permanent. Otherwise, if you take off the bus effects, then it's not applied anymore. And that's a big distinction in the workflow. Now, what does happen once you get all those shortcuts in your brain is a very fast workflow. And so if that doesn't scare you, or if that doesn't turn you off from a creative perspective, then you should definitely consider jumping in to this workflow, because it's just very fast. It's quick to sketch things. Not that the MPC isn't fast, because it is, and I prefer it over traditional DAWs at this point when I'm just like sketching out ideas. But I think the SP404 probably wins slightly in the audio workflow department. So with just the MPC One Plus, I believe this is like $200 more than the SP404mk2. So in terms of like value cost type of stuff, the SP404 is definitely going to be cheaper, but it is missing a lot of the additional things that the MPC can do. I mean, the MPC is going to be more of a full-on platform for completing music, and the SP404 can get you there, but there's going to be limitations upon limitations upon limitations. However, the limitations usually breeds creativity. So at times it can just be like, well, this is what you have, and just do it. Like, that's honestly the benefit of using hardware, is that your options are the hardware that's in front of you. And that can be very beneficial for your creative process. Where that process breaks down is when you need to finish something really fast for a client, or you need to get more finer with the mixing capabilities, or if you need to send off stems and all that, then you have to get a workflow to transfer this stuff. And that's, you know, for a different video, obviously. That's kind of where the creative excitement will fizzle out, and suddenly you have to like send it over to a DAW for finishing. Let's talk about hardware real quick. So again, the 404 is the cheapest of these two right here. The MPC does have a bunch of other models, and if you know one MPC, you pretty much know the others, which I think is a benefit. If you get familiar with the MPC 1 Plus, then you're familiar with the MPC Key 37, Key 61. Like if you've used one in a studio, you can pretty much pick up the other and get going right away, which I think that's a benefit personally. That does mean that you get different features per MPC. So for this example, I'm just going to compare the MPC 1 Plus since it's the cheapest of all the MPCs that are currently available as of this video. So in this department, actually, I think the SP404 wins pretty considerably. And the reason I say that is it has an additional mic guitar input right here. So in the front, you can actually plug in a dynamic microphone and have a gain setting right here. And you can also plug in a guitar directly, and you have like guitar modeling effects in here. And you can't do that on the MPC. You have to have like an additional device to do that. For instance, you can plug in an audio interface in the USB port at the back, and then it will hopefully recognize it, and then you can use that type of configuration to record microphones and guitars. The problem is you need another audio interface to do that. It doesn't inherently do it by itself with the MPC 1 Plus. The Key 61 does have that, but that's also like $1,500. So you have two outputs and two inputs for the MPC 1 Plus, and you do have a headphones in the front right here, and you do have a SD card, and there is an SD card on the SP404 on the side. There is a stereo pair input on the SP404 in addition to the mic guitar that's in the front as well. So I think that's more convenient. And there's also multiple options to power the SP404. So you can have the wall wart power supply, which I'm using right now. You can also power it via USB-C, which can then connect to a computer or a power bank or whatever. And then you also have the option of AA batteries. So you can technically use this as a battery operated platform, and really makes me wish that the MPC 1 Plus had that built in. The MPC, on the other hand, only has one option to power it, and it is the included power brick. You can source a third-party adapter for a battery that will be external to the unit, but then you're paying for additional stuff on top of what you've already paid for your MPC. The SP404 also does not have a touchscreen. It's actually a pretty small screen right here, but it gets the job done. Feels kind of like a gaming system from like the 90s. The MPC is basically a tablet. So they have like a tablet screen with additional hardware controls that are connected, and the operating system is like a Linux operating system, I believe. So you could think of this basically as like a Linux tablet with buttons. And not like the SP404 is far off from that. It's obviously its own like ARM-based digital system. Both of these platforms, if you get used to their workflows, will be quick, faster than using a keyboard and mouse typically. The MPC is going to provide less limitations, so there will be more options for workflow, and workflow things that might mean you make more complex projects, possibly. Of the two workflows, I think personally that the MPC is easier to learn. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you feel like the 404 was easier to learn, or you think it looks like it's easier to learn. That's totally fair. From my personal experience, the 404 has required me to look up the manual and watch more videos, way more than any other device that I've owned. And I think the reason is because there is so many shortcuts for everything. Like again, you have to hold remain to see information about a particular pad that you have selected. But there's also shift, and shift does things. And also if you hold push in, you can get different type of triggers and things that can happen with all these buttons. That just adds to the complexity, in my opinion, of what you have to keep in mind, what you have to remember. So this is the type of device where if you learn it and then step away for a couple months, you're gonna forget quite a bit. Now, if you used it exclusively for like a year, I don't think that would happen. But if you're like me, where you like to try out a lot of different devices, this workflow has been the least sticky of them all. Now with Update 404, they've done quite a bit of things that have made it more user-friendly and given it more options and flexibility for the workflow. Like when it first came out, you couldn't actually edit the notes that you recorded for a pattern. You had to just erase it and redo it. So down the road, they added that ability. You can actually go in and edit like on a step editor for the notes. That was a nice feature that they added. Also, a looper didn't exist until update 404. So now you can do a 4-bar looper on here, which is a nice little workflow bonus. And actually, that reminds me, there is something that only exists on the 404 right now that the MPC cannot do in terms of workflow. If you were to just say make a like a 1-bar loop on the SP404, let's say you have a 4-to-the-4 kick going on, you could then record samples and keep them as one-shots, and then the one-shots will not re-trigger until the actual sample is completely done. This is very different from the way the MPC does this. One-shots on the MPC, if I go program edit on here, this is currently on one-shot mode. Okay? One-shot mode makes sense on here because, you know, if you tap it really fast, it's gonna keep on triggering it, right? That's working the way you think it would work. One-shot mode on the SP404 is different in that it will keep on playing regardless of getting triggered. So on pad 8 right here, I've got this bass. If I tap it, see what's happening? It's not re-triggering. That's because it's in one-shot mode. And the way you get to one-shot mode with this is you hold the push and you press gate. I mean, if you know it, then you know it. It's no problem. But if you just got this machine, you're like, how do I get to that one-shot mode? It'd be like, Google, what the hell's happening? So what does that mean for a workflow? It means that you can have just this 1-bar loop going on, and you can have samples of varying lengths triggering and playing, and you don't have to worry about keeping track of when those samples trigger on what bar. They will just always trigger when the loop starts over if they've run their full cycle. So you could have one sample that's going like 4 bars. It could be like some pads that are changing chords or something. And then you can have a bass line that's 8 bars, but your drums can just be 1 bar. So you can have this like 4-to-the-floor type of kick, be manipulating it that way. It's an interesting workflow that does not exist on the MPC. You can't do that right now because on the MPC, if you put your sequence to 1 bar, there's no way that you could have something play out for 8 bars without like muting the track or muting the sample trigger playback to recreate that. Anyways, I should wrap up this video. It's probably already too long as is. If you enjoyed this and you want to purchase one of these devices, if you use my affiliate links, then it helps out the channel. So thank you very much if you do that. Our choice is Zounds. We've been using them for years, so they're our go-to affiliate. And that goes for, you know, any MPC or synthesizer or anything like that, or if you're gonna pick up cables. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think after seeing this, and if you are planning on picking up one of them. And if you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards. But that's it. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time for another one. Peace.